I remember the first sound that truly terrified me as a child. This wasn't a sound that was mundane, like a grinding gate in the middle of a windy night, nor a dog barking as I passed by. I knew why these sounds were the way they were, because they sounded natural. I believed they could exist in this world. Then I was exposed to this sound from a game on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. That was the first sound to have ever scared me as a child. Hello, my name is Seamus McNeil and I am with Grasp Your Heart Productions. The 16-bit sound effect that was created by the game studio Square Enix was something that I never thought I would be experiencing in my life. As a 5-year-old child, that comes to no surprise that there's a lot to learn. However, that's something that I was scared of. I was scared I wasn't going to learn what that sound effect was or what was the nature behind it. The game Chrono Trigger created one of my first fearful experiences from media, and I would always appreciate it for that. The game's main antagonist, Lavos, creates this sense of dread the very first time it appears. When I learned the full story of Lavos from Chrono Trigger, it did not alleviate my fear, it made it far worse. This was a being that I couldn't comprehend. This could have been my wild imagination going out of control, but it fascinated me. What specific thing was it that caused me to be so infatuated with this pattern of pixels? I tried to think, and while I was trying to figure it out, I heard the noise again. It was the scream of this unnatural creation. It was that sound that was warped, distorted, and otherworldly. Why did it scare me so much? I decided to dissect the 7-second sound effect that has haunted me for almost my whole life. This sound that caused me to fall in love with horror and being afraid of media. I separated the high and low frequency parts of this sound effect. Here's the low frequency. This is quite similar to a guttural roar of a beast, such as a bear, but it seems to be extended unnaturally. But then, when we listen to the high frequency sound by itself, it sounds like a screeching animal, either in pain or in severe distress. When both of these are combined, we get the notorious Lavos screech. Now, what is the point in separating the two frequencies? I think it's because of how differently they sound by themselves. The low frequency sounds like a roar of a gargantuan creature, either as a battle cry or a warning, and then to be combined with the high frequency screech of a very distressed, potentially similarly sized creature, but the sense of impossible duality created by both of them being combined, it causes our senses to go haywire. As we hear both the roar of a potential predator and a creature in distress, these mixed signals combined into one otherworldly screech makes Lavos truly enigmatic. The very sound it creates gives us no indication of what it is. It is screaming, yet we cannot decipher if it feels threatened or if instead it is threatening us. So if such a complex and well thought out sound effect could be generated as early as the SNES era, what legacy of sound effects and even better, what horrifying experiences could video games create in the future? There's quite a few examples already. There's Resident Evil. There's Silent Hill. There's games such as Outlast and Amnesia: The Dark Descent that have came out recently that have created such a buzz among the community, it's almost reaching legendary status. However, there is one game that I do not think gets enough credit for starting this trend, or at least attempting to. It came out for the NES for the first game of its entire series, and it is still beloved by its community today. We still await a sequel for it, but that game series is Metroid. Now, the first Metroid game did look a little bit like this. It's hard to imagine what's so scary about it now. While the first two games of the series aren't particularly scary, they are still very alien and unusual. The games take heavy inspiration from Ridley Scott's Alien and Aliens, which are phenomenal sci-fi horror and action movies. When Metroid began to become more of an iconic series, though, was when Super Metroid was released. Another Super Nintendo game which surprised many people with how dark and grim the world was made out to be. With genuinely disturbing visuals, music, and creature designs that are just out of the world and imagination of most people. This is how it became a classic. The series progressed with Metroid Fusion and Metroid Prime. They are very different games developed by two completely different studios. Nintendo DNR1 for Fusion and Retro Studios for Prime. While Fusion continued the legacy of the two-dimensional platform exploring shooter, Prime decided to take it to 3D. And the transition was brilliant. They did decide to do something that not many people seem to mention, but I believe it is worth doing so. Metroid's game over screens. Game over screens are usually seen as irritating or a hindrance to the experience. Very few actually make you feel like you had died, even if it states the words, "you died." Deaths in Metroid have been strange. In the original NES title, your death is just exploding. It's no wonder no one knew Samus was a woman, since when you die, you explode like a machine into several pieces. In Metroid 2, you just get deleted, and that was it. It's still slightly eerie, but it's nothing really to pay much mind to. Super Metroid and Fusion have very similar death sequences, with Samus curling up in a blinking suit before it detonates and reveals Samus vulnerable. But then there's Prime, where it gets dark. That really does feel like the game is over. You hear her death scream before you see her die inside her suit, with the monitor flatlining and then cutting off. You feel haunted by getting killed, and they do not let up with the game over screens either. In Metroid Prime 2, Echoes, they begin to zoom in on her dead eyes, her lungs, and her heart just manic beating, going into a near flatline, and even more distorting messages seemingly attacking you for letting her die. Of course they decided that they needed to keep this going with Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. Metroid Prime 3's game over screen has Samus scream and then transitions into a pool of blood growing, implying her bleeding out. The uncomfortable, distorted sounds with a lot less information creates a lot more of a harrowing experience. However, instead of just the one game over screen, they had two. The Corruption ending. This has the same animation, but with a blue liquid to replace Samus's bleeding. The meltdown of Samus's suit is really terrifying, with the tendrils and flashing red inside the helmet. However, the sounds of sirens inside the suit create that extra layer of dread. It's a warning, and if you don't stop, you're cruel for making Samus die like this. So, how much do sound effects and music
in general affect the horror genre? A lot. That includes the absence of sounds and music. It can create a really eerie atmosphere. However, sometimes it can completely ruin a scene, film, or even trailer. One of the most infamous trailers that was admittedly a mistake was seen as hilarious but still highlighted a problem. Look at this mess.
Pan, this is November 4099er.
What the hell?
This is the Mummy trailer 2017. The very minimal use of sounds actually creates a very tense and atmospheric opening. Then all falls apart when the screaming and dialogue starts. It just ends up being hilarious. I do think that this trailer coming out in its state does really prove that there are ways to make interesting trailers with minimal sound effects and music, but if it's almost completely absent or not even thought about, it doesn't work. Even when you think that a scene is silent, there's still a lot of thought put into the sounds. Perhaps more so than a few seconds you hear are vital when it's simple footsteps that are made to sound surrounding. It requires extreme amounts of editing, tweaking, and precision. However, there is my most hated trend in the horror industry. Jump scares. I detest jump scares. Well, to be precise, I don't hate jump scares as a concept. They can be played and they can be used expertly. For example, in Nightmare on Elm Street, they are used to great effect as an initiation tool. What better way to get your heart racing than a disfigured child murderer jumping out of nowhere and keeping your heart going with an intense soundtrack and the maniac chasing the victim? There's really not much better than a jump scare, but it also has a narrative purpose in the film. This is very unlike what movies such as The Nun does.
Hello.
What is the point to this? To get a reaction out of the audience by blasting some loud noises at them? I mean, you're just startling them, you're not really scaring them. It's lazy. It's stupid, and you're going to desensitize your audience to this if you keep doing it throughout the movie. But there are so many ways to use sound effects, we barely realize when they're used to great effect, as that's the goal. To make you believe it isn't fake, but it's real. I believe there is so much to the world of sounds that we can still discover, learn, and manipulate to continue advancing all media platforms. There are things such as 8D audio, which is perfect for audio dramas, that are making a comeback thanks to podcasts. However, if films such as The Nun continue to prove majorly profitable, a lot of the industry may not even consider advancing sound effects at all. And I really hate that idea of stagnation, particularly in the film industry. I think we should continue to strive to be as creative as possible and not allow cheap tricks to undermine these well thought out, intelligent creations.
However, that is simply my own opinion. I think that as a horror fan, I really do want to see the genre grow. But I am still afraid that sometimes people will just let it stay as it is. There's still a lot of people willing to make a lot of brilliant projects, however, and I look forward to seeing many more coming out.
This has been Seamus McNeil with Grasp Your Heart Productions. If your heart's racing, then so is your mind. I hope to see you all in another video.